Tisha have all conveniently forgotten who really opened the door for them to be on this platform. Others couldn't believe that instead of growth, the cast seems to be recycling the same drama season after season with no real evolution. People also didn't hold back when it came to comparing Nell's situation to Tisha's. One comment bluntly said, "At least Nell has a daycare to run back to. What does Tisha have, Marceau?" That line alone went viral in fan discussions because it touched on one of the biggest criticisms surrounding Tisha, her dependency on Marceau and his questionable business moves. Fans reminded everyone that Marceau doesn't even have his builder's license and allegedly runs black under someone else's name. So, while Nell may have stepped away from the show, she at least has something real to fall back on. Another group of fans strongly believed that most of the people defending Tisha online were actually her family members. According to them, there's no way Tisha suddenly has all this support unless her family was in the comments fighting her battles. And that in itself sparked more criticism, because if there's one thing viewers can't stand, it's when cast members constantly avoid accountability and lean on others to fight for them instead of standing 10 toes down on their own. Then came the heated clapbacks. People accused Nell of being bitter, claiming she only lashed out because she was no longer on the show. But Nell herself seemed to hit back at that narrative, pointing out that she was tired of the circus-like atmosphere that LAM had turned into. For her, the show had shifted away from business, growth, and community impact, and had sunk deeper into petty fights and hood-level drama. In her words, she maintained her integrity, while others were busy declassing the show. And then came Destiny's name. Nell didn't hesitate to shade Destiny, questioning why she was even back on the show. Fans jumped in as well, calling Destiny a hood booger who hadn't managed to keep a real storyline going. According to the online chatter, the only thing Destiny had left to her name was selling lottery tickets, and people were sick of her circling back into the narrative. Still, what made Nell's quitting so sad is the way her attempt to call out the truth backfired. She pointed out Tisha's lack of transparency, her tendency to play victim, and her habit of running from accountability. But instead of people siding with her, many accused Nell of being the negative one. Fans compared this to how Tisha always shifts blame. When Chris Fletcher refused to answer to her, it exposed her strategy for what it really was. Yet somehow, Nell ended up being the one dragged. The bigger issue here is what her exit represents. Nell tried to keep the conversation centered around growth in business, but the show thrives off chaos. And when someone isn't willing to sink down into the mud, they either get labeled as boring or they're painted as the problem. That's the sad truth about reality TV. The loudest, messiest, and most controversial personalities are the ones who survive, while the level-headed ones eventually fade out. And let's not ignore the fact that fans were quick to point out hypocrisy within the group. Tisha wants transparency from others, but refuses to offer it herself. She plays the victim card when convenient, but dodges accountability when confronted. Viewers have seen this cycle time and time again, and Nell calling it out only highlighted what many fans have been saying for years. At the end of the day, Nell quitting LAM is more than just one cast member stepping away. It's a reflection of how toxic environments push away the people who are actually trying to build something real. Nell still has her daycare, her business, her community presence, but the show lost someone who could have balanced out the madness. Meanwhile, the Utes, ones who thrive on playing victim and stirring up drama, continue to dominate the screen. And that's the sad reality of Nell quitting LAM. She walked away with her dignity intact, but the show lost yet another chance at real growth. What's even more telling is how quickly the narrative shifted after Nell left. Suddenly, people were rewriting history, painting her as if she had no real impact on the show. But longtime viewers know that Nell brought a certain level of balance and maturity that the cast desperately needed. Without her, the dynamic feels even more one-sided. And that imbalance is going to show as the season continues. The sad part is, rather than acknowledging her contributions, some fans and cast members seemed almost eager to erase her influence. Another interesting point fans raised was the double standard in how Nell was treated versus how others are given. Endless chances. Destiny, for example, has been dragged season after season for not having a storyline, yet she continues to pop back up. Meanwhile, Nell calls out some hard truths, and she's instantly labeled as bitter or negative. That contradiction says a lot about the politics behind the scenes of LAM, where messiness seems to get rewarded while honesty gets punished. And then there's the question of family loyalty. Some fans argued that Nell's connection to Chris Fletcher automatically made her a target. Since Marceau and Maurice have made it clear they don't want to be held accountable for their alleged business and personal mess, having Nell around to challenge that narrative was never going to end well. In fact, several fans believe that her exit wasn't entirely voluntary, that maybe there was subtle pressure for her to bow out quietly rather than continue stirring the pot. But even with all the drama surrounding her, Nell's presence highlighted a bigger issue about the direction of Lamb. What was once framed as a show about love, marriage, and building businesses in Huntsville has slowly turned into a revolving door of shade, scandals, and clapbacks. The balance between showcasing success and exploiting dysfunction has tipped way too far into the negative, and Nell's frustration with that shift resonated with a lot of viewers who feel the same way. Fans also noted how ironic it was that Tisha seemed to come out looking like the winner in this situation. For years, people have criticized her for leaning on Marceau and avoiding accountability. Yet when Nell dragged her, the backlash didn't stick. Instead, Tisha got a wave of sympathy and defense, even though she hasn't shown much personal growth on the show. Some viewers believe this is less about Tisha herself and more about how desperate fans are for any kind of underdog story, even if it means ignoring her flaws.